So for our first project, we are going to be making a Zentangle. So these are examples of Zentangles that students made last quarter. A Zentangle is a drawing that is comprised up of tangles, and tangles are patterns that are created for a Zentangle drawing. You'll notice that these tangles are being drawn within these lines. These lines are called leading lines. They're meant to lead your eye throughout the entire composition. So that is going to be what we're going to be working towards today, is how can we make interesting lines, creative patterns, and a Zentangle that utilizes the elements and principles of design. To begin, I would like you to open up your Element of Design notes on Schoology. Please fill in the notes as you're watching the PowerPoint because you're going to have to reference that material as we go through the quarter. So today we're going to be learning about line and line variation and organic and geometric shapes. So the first two objects here on our Element of Design list. Later in the quarter we'll be talking about space, value, color, and texture, but for this project we're going to be focusing on line, shape, and form. Now the elements of design are the things that are seen in all artworks. So over here in this installation, we see line, we see a form of the person's body. We're seeing value of the black and white. We're also seeing color, the black and white. The texture of everything looks nice and smooth, and we're seeing a space. There's objects in a space of a room. Things are overlapping, so we're seeing depth. So actually, we are seeing all of the elements of design in this one artwork. So for line, our first element of design, there are 5 different types of line. We have horizontal, vertical, diagonal, zigzag, and curvy. Now I know what you're probably thinking. You're like, oh my gosh, those lines are so boring to look at. Well, don't worry, we are going to make them look more exciting by varying the lines to make them look a little bit more interesting. So let's start with the horizontal line. First thing that you can do to make a horizontal line look more interesting is change the width. So if I start with this horizontal line, I could maybe make it a little bit thicker on one end than the other. And these are things that you're going to have to think about whenever you're creating your Zentangle. When you're drawing those patterns, you're going to have to ask yourself, okay, is the line that I'm drawing right now in this pattern, is it interesting enough? Should I make it a little bit wider on one end? And you can see that compared to the line on the left versus the line on the right is a little bit more, actually not a little bit, a lot more interesting to look at. The next variation you can do is you can change the length. So let's look at a zigzag line. To make a zigzag line look more interesting, you could have the length of the zigzags be going in at different heights. And obviously, this one looks way more interesting than the one we did over here. You could also change the degree of curve of a line. So here, the curvy line is all on the same axis, right? Like the curves are going at an even pace. Well, what if you actually change the angle that you're drawing those curves at? It's actually starting to make it look really more interesting. Now I connected my lines here, so it's not actually a line anymore. That became a shape. So let me try that again. There. Now the last one is texture. I don't know about if you guys have a pet, but we just got a petite golden doodle, and his name is Gimli from the Dwarf and Lord of the Rings. Mr. Thompson and I are huge Lord of the Ring and Harry Potter fans. And so, of course, we had to name our dog after one of those characters. So Gimli has the softest fur. So if I wanted to show Gimli's fur, I could take a diagonal line, and then I could add in some really nice soft type of lines here to give a little bit more of a texture. Now Gimli has some curly fur in there, so I'm trying to curl the edges a little bit as I go. But you can see how this line has some texture added onto it, and it makes it look a lot more interesting than this regular diagonal line we have on the left. Now textures can come in a variety of shapes and sizes. You know, maybe you have a pet turtle at home or a snake, which I don't know why you would want that as a pet, but if you do, okay, good for you. But you know, you could add in some bumps and lumps to that. I know, you know, the snake scales can be a little bumpy when you pet them. So here we're creating that illusion of a bumpy texture. So think outside of the box when you start drawing your patterns and your tangles for the Zentangle project. You're going to want to incorporate variations of lines into those patterns to make your work look more interesting. The next element of design that we're going to be learning and using for our Zentangle project is shape. Shape is a two-dimensional object. Shapes are flat and once again have two dimensions, height and width. Now, in an artwork, there are two other things that you might hear of positive and negative shapes. The positive shape or space is the thing that you draw, and the negative shape or negative space is the area around the objects you draw. When you go in and design your leading lines on your Zentangle, you're going to have to be aware of the negative space you're creating and how that adds to your overall composition. Here we have shapes drawn in or actually cut into a piece of a collaged artwork. Notice that there's no depth, it's just, two dimensions, height and width, so these would be considered shapes. Now with shapes, there are two different kinds that we can use as artists. There's geometric and organic. Geometric shapes typically described as being man-made and don't often appear in nature. Geometric shapes, usually you can give them a name. So for instance, we have, I'll use a different color. We have a square, circle, rectangle, pentagon, oval, triangle. Oh my gosh, what's the sixth one? What is that? I can't remember. Whatever this one's called, that, you can give it a name. I'm not a math teacher, I'm so sorry. But, you can name geometric shapes. However, organic shapes are associated with things from the natural world and appear to be curving and flowing. So, they almost look like something and it's very flowy, but you can't really quite give it a name. Like this kind of looks like it could be a cloud, but once again, look at how flowy those lines are. Much of a contrast to the really hard, rigid shapes that we're seeing on the left. So organic shapes, they're going to be really soft and round, very playful. They're going to look like things that you could potentially find if you would walk outside in the woods. I do want to talk about forms because shape and form tend to go hand in hand. We will not be using forms with the Zentangle, but this is just a good time to talk about what forms are. Forms are different than shapes because forms are three-dimensional. They are objects with height, width, and depth. Now, if you would take a drawing course with me, we would be drawing forms. We want to create the illusion of a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface. And we show that illusion by using a full range of value, the darkest darks to the lightest lights. So here we have a wrench. It is shaded with a graphite pencil. We have a full range of value added onto it, so it looks three-dimensional. Now here, this saw on the lower right-hand corner, this would be considered a shape. We're only seeing height and width. There's no depth there. However, this saw on the left, you can see that this is actually a form. There's height, width, and then there's depth. This is actually a sculpture that was created by Claes Oldenburg and Koos van Bruggen, and they're most well known for sculpting everyday objects and enlarging them to a very large scale. So I thought this was very fitting. I also loved how they've placed this saw next to a building that's very geometric. They chose an object with geometric lines and shapes to reflect the geometric forms that we're seeing on the building. So this was a nice unified, which unity is a principle of design. This is a very nice unified artwork with its surroundings. So for this one, to name a geometric shape, you could say, a circle, square, triangle, but its geometric form would be maybe a sphere, something that's shaded to make it look three-dimensional. You could say a cube. And then the triangle, you could call it a prism. So to review, we've learned about line and how you can vary line to make it look more interesting. We've learned about shape and how you can have geometric or organic shapes in your Zentangle. We've also learned about form and how form is three-dimensional. Once again, now that we've learned about those things, you can see that we have organic shapes within this artwork. Everything is very flowy. It's not too rigid. It kind of flows throughout the form. We have lots of variation in lines. The line width is changing, especially across here. We also have degree of curve changes. You can see here along this edge of this pattern that they're creating, the degree of curve is changing. Actually, almost everywhere the degree of curve is changing. We also have a form. The person that's sitting in the middle here is three-dimensional. She has height, width, and depth, as well as the chair that she is sitting on. So you can start to see how we're noticing these elements in this picture that we just looked at a little bit ago. So the elements of design are the things that make up an artwork. The principles of design is what we do with the elements. How we apply the principles of design determines how successful the work of art is. So the first principle that we're going to be learning about and using in our Zentangle is unity and harmony. Harmony refers to a way of combining similar elements like line, shape, and color in an artwork to accent their similarities. You achieve unity and harmony by repeating and or gradually changing similar elements of design. Pieces that are in harmony have an overall uniform appearance. I did forget to mention that you'll need to write these notes in your Principle of Design notes on Schoology as well. So, like I said, harmony is achieved mostly by repeating like or similar elements. So this is a painting that is done by Chuck Close, and he is repeating the element of shape. And if you notice, he's actually repeating organic shapes. We have this beautiful, free-flowing, curvilinear, circular forms throughout the entire face. And these circular shapes, these organic shapes, are creating this baby's face. In addition to this, we also have diagonal lines that are being repeated. Those diagonal lines are the lines that are created to create this grid. You'll notice that they're going diagonally this way as well as diagonally in the opposite direction. And even though this baby is being painted with organic shapes, the organic shapes and the range of values is creating a form overall. We're getting the illusion of a three-dimensional person here, which is very, very well done. This would be a challenge to create, but he did a great job doing it. So because he's repeating those similar organic shapes everywhere, he's repeating those diagonal lines, we have a unified principle of design. So for your assignment today, I want you to go to the material section in Art Introduction, click on the Zentangle project, then open up the Zentangle pattern folder. You are going to decide whether or not you want to draw organic or geometric tangles for your Zentangle project. Tomorrow, we are going to be learning how to draw our tangles together so they look like they're flowing from one to another. So you want to find tangles that relate to one another. So for instance, this tangle called Foxtrot, as I look at it, I'm noticing that it's very flowy, it's very curvy, so that would be an organic tangle. Now I need to find a second tangle since I've chosen organic that relates to that one. Now, conveniently, the tangle on the right, this one's called Everybody Let's Do the Diva Dance. This one is very similar and is also organic. So I've already found two tangles for my assignment. Now I need to keep going through until I find two more tangles. When I'm looking for tangles to use together, I want to make sure that I'm drawing tangles with a lot of contrast. And what I mean by contrast, that there should be a lot of black with the white. Now these two tangles, there's not a lot of black with them. So the next tangle I find that I'm going to draw tomorrow, I need to find a tangle that's organic that has more black. And once again, I'm like lucking out today. This Bunzo tangle on the left has a lot of black in it. It's very organic because it's circular and that would work well. And then for my fourth tangle, I'm just going to keep, going down until I find another one. And this one on the right here with these, hill or arcs, that is also very organic and very black and white. So those are going to be my 4 tangles that I'm going to use. Doing the preparation work by finding the 4 tangles will make tomorrow's assignment go by much easier and faster. So make sure that you know the 4 tangles that you need to use, so when you come to class tomorrow, you can be able to get started right away after my demonstration and draw to success.